Our God, we really need this, that you would touch us and that your fire would cleanse us through and through. All we could do is too little. What we can do is just superficial, outward things. But you're the one that can penetrate to the depths of our heart. And you can cleanse us and shape us. And our desire is that this morning, let this happen. Therefore, we would like to open our hearts and ourselves before you so that you might come and talk to us, come close to us. And it's your presence should surround us, and then your love might renew us. Please kindle our hearts for you. And we thank you that we can so be before you. We're expecting your words, your closeness. Thank you that you call and that we can come to you. Amen. Well, welcome in love. In many aspects, today is a gift. Usually, Sundays in themselves are gifts. It's a gift from God where we can remember what He has done for us, how we gain a new life, why we can even come before Him. And it's a gift that we can be together finally again. I can see you and I can meet you, although still only in the mask. But it's a big gift to be, I must say, that it's not just a few of us here, but more and more. And we also greet those of you that can only follow along from their homes. It's quite a gift, though, that we have a method now for the broadcast so that people that are being hindered, either for health reasons or for other reasons, they can still join in. And it's a gift because this Sunday is a gift, or at least for me it is, that we can look at the book of Nehemiah. I've been preparing for this, but I have never expected it to be so relevant, what we're studying. And my hope is that I'm not the only one that finds it so relevant, but God is also talking to you through this. And I hope that this old story, He can fully renew for you and can fill it with life for us. And why can we hope this? Because our belief is that we're not hearing the words of man, but that the Holy Spirit is doing her work. And those words which God sends us, the Holy Spirit will fill with life and will start applying in our lives. And I hope in its miracle every time I get up here and try to say something about God's work, and this is my confidence now too. And this is how we get to the next passage in the book of Nehemiah. And, well, let me recap a little bit of the past period on the things that we have looked at so far. And let me just review a couple of important lessons that have been very important for me and have touched my heart. One of them is that prayer opens a door for God to act. And I think it's not like, how shall I say this? It's not just like a snap of the finger where, okay, now we prayed and things will go the way we want them to. No, I don't think that. I think when we come before God in prayer, then we ourselves become capable of having God work in us, and we can see what He has planned because we give Him space. We go quite far on our own, out of our own strength, before we turn it over to God. But when we finally start praying, then we come before God, and then we expect Him to act. And in that respect, I meant that prayer opens a space or door for God to act. The next thing is that you can see beyond the present, as discouraging as it is right now. You can see beyond it, and you can see what doesn't even exist yet, not even in traces, but could be and will happen. because God can accomplish it. And then Nehemiah does not only see the desired future and dreams on how beautiful it will be one day, how nice it will be when this all happens, but what does he do? He starts acting, working very actively, and he works for it, that whatever he sees, what only exists in his mind, might materialize. And then a very special thing was to see how much God appreciates those that work, labor in his work. And maybe the last time I was not clear enough regarding this, and maybe I didn't emphasize enough that there is a misunderstanding on this. And we think that when we talk about getting into God's work, then most people mean one thing. Somebody finally forsakes all, gives everything up, and chooses full-time service. No, that doesn't mean that. Getting into God's work, let me say, well, I wouldn't say it's got nothing to, full-time ministry has nothing to do with the work of God. No, that doesn't mean that, but that's not what it only means. If somebody is a pastor or doing full-time ministry, well, that's his given job. But God's work is not only done by them. It happens in our everyday life. It happens in our life. It happens in your life. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, throughout the week. In the different meetings, in your work, in different life situations that God leads you into, in the difficulties that God allows you to enter into. All these things are part of God's work. Situations in which you can decide to adjust yourself to what God has prepared, or that you'll go after your own thoughts and you'll somehow try to solve the situation. In that respect, I meant that God appreciates those that are in His work. And then, for me, it's very important that what we do today, whatever it is, it has an effect on the future. Of course, on the present, but on the future as well. We need to learn to look at things that way, our own lives and our deeds as well. That it's not just our little world. Whatever we do has an effect on our environment and also on the future, on the ones that come after us. We don't have to be afraid of that. Like, holy heavens, what is this going to cause then? No, we can allow God to use us, shape us, and then He'll do what only He can, that He makes us a blessing for our environment in the present, and our blessings can have an effect on the ones coming after us as well. And then God invites us into His work, both you and I. Not only Nehemiah, he didn't only invite the Judeans, but He invites you and me now, here, in Érdligeti, in this period of time. Why? Couldn't He do His work by Himself? Does He need faithful robots that do what needs to be done? No. Not because of that. God could probably do His work much better without us. If He could leave us out of this whole thing, probably He would do a much better job without us. But no, He's not inviting us for that. But that we could finally see Him at work. That we could see Him face to face or in work, that we could experience what He's like. That we could get to know Him in different capacities. So that our relationship could become more personal. As Job said, so far I've only heard about you, but now I know you very differently. And God uses different things in our lives. With Job, it was not easy what God led him into, although he was such a holy man. Yet, God used the difficulties in his life. And this is how we get to the passage that we're going to look at now from the book of Nehemiah. After many years, many decades of waiting, finally, there's the team, the host, as we sang the song before. Okay, now we'll get to work. And the hope arises in them that finally it looks like it's going to amount to something. We're not going to have to look at the rubbish and the ruins for the next couple of decades. Well, then let's get to work. And with Nehemiah leading, everyone gets to work. Well, not everybody. We read that not everyone's involved. Some people have said, well, the whole thing is pointless. Some others have said, this is not my job. But many people join in, all kinds of people, priests, leaders, parents, children, goldsmiths, ointment makers, all kinds of people, and they do what they can. Their little section of the wall. They're building it, repairing it, and it looks like things are getting along. And finally, things are now materializing that have only existed in Nehemiah's mind. And everything is very nice and fine, isn't it? Well, so, as they say. So far, so good, but it's very rarely that something starts out real well, and then it just goes on real well. I know for myself, what I'm experiencing is that when something good starts out, then something else comes, usually a difficulty or a trial. And so far, there's already been signals that things are not going to be so smooth, but now we see that the situation is intensifying and the outside pressure is mounting that also appears in your life and my life. And then let's read this passage with this in mind, that this didn't only happen to Nehemiah, it happens to us a little bit different, but this today, tomorrow, and possibly in the past was similar. So I'm going to be reading Nehemiah chapter 4. Let me say that this is the fourth chapter in the translation I'm going to read you. Also in the old translation, it's number 4. In some of the newer translations, the numbering is different. This would be the end of the third chapter in certain versions of newer translations. I might add that I'm sure you've heard this before, that when the Bible was first written, it was not numbered. The numbers came in later. They were added later for us to navigate it better, to find verses easier. But these were continuous texts. Not only that, but if you look at some of the old scrolls of the Old Testament, you'll see that there was not even separation between the sentences. So for us, it wouldn't be so easy to read the original text. Before the Lord Jesus, these Masoretes, it was their job to separate the sentences so that they could become understandable for us and so we could follow along with the text. So there's no problem. These differences come from different people having used different translations and what original text they looked at. And so the numbering might differ a little bit. That's the only reason. So I'm going to read you now chapter 4 from my translation. But it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall, he was wroth and took great indignation and mocked the Jews. And he spake before his brethren and the army of Samaria and said, What do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish which are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was by him, and he said, Even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall. Hear, O our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them for a prey in the land of captivity, and cover not their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out from before thee, for they have provoked thee to anger before the builders. So built we the wall, and all the wall was joined together unto the half thereof, and for the people had a mind to work. But it came to pass that when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were made up and that the breaches began to be stopped, then they were very wroth and conspired all of them together to come and to fight against Jerusalem to hinder it. Nevertheless, we made our prayer unto our God and set a watch against them day and night because of them. And Judah said, the strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed, and there's much rubbish, so that we're not able to build a wall. And our adversaries said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them, and slay them, and cause the work to cease. And it came to pass, that when the Jews which dwelt by them came, and said unto us 10 times, from all places whence ye shall return unto us, they will be upon you. Therefore set I the lower places behind the wall, and on the higher places I even set the people after their families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and rose up, and said unto the nobles, and the rulers, and to the rest of the people, be not ye afraid of them, remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. And it came to pass, when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, every one unto his work. And it came to pass from the time forth, that half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held both the spears, the shields, the bows, and the haubergens, and the rulers were behind all the house of Judah, they which builded on the wall, and they that bare burdens, with those that laded, every one with one of his hands wrought in the work, and with the other hand held a weapon. For the builders, every one had his sword girded by his side, and so builded. And he that sounded the trumpet was by me. And I said unto the nobles, the rulers, and to the rest of the people, the work is great and large, and we're separated upon the wall, one far from another. And in what place, therefore, ye hear the sound of the trumpet, resort ye thither unto us, our God shall fight for us. So we labored in the work, and half of them held the spears from the rising of the morning till the stars appeared. Likewise, at the same time said I unto the people, let every one with his servant lodge within Jerusalem, that in the night they may be a guard to us, and labor on the day. So neither I, nor my brethren, nor my servants, nor the man of the guard which followed me, none of us put off clothes, saving that every one put them off for washing.
Azt is megmondtam az embereknek, hogy a segítőikkel együtt mindannyian maradjanak éjjelre is Jeruzsálemben, hogy éjjel őrködjenek, és nappal dolgozzanak a falakon. Mi is állandóan fegyveresen jártunk. Én és a rokonaim, a szolgáim és az engem kísérő testőrök valamennyien. Még a ruháinkat is csak annyi időre vettük le, amíg megmosakodtunk.
Well, the ideal circumstances have changed, and I believe this is something that you can always count on. The ideal or the ideal seeming situations and circumstances are going to change, and problems will appear from without, from within, mostly everywhere. And we read that here's this Sanballat again, and not only by himself, but there's a whole host around him. And he's complaining before the hosts, and then this Tobiah guy appears from somewhere, and he's cursing, scolding, mocking the workers, the ones that are laboring in the work, and it's kind of like a spiritual warfare that he launches against them. And we could say, oh, that's not such a big problem as long as they're not being killed and they're not shooting at them and they're not being cut by swords. There's no big problem. But this spiritual warfare or psychological warfare is a very subtle thing, because many times it's more effective than the direct confrontation, because it discourages people. It raises doubts. maybe he's right. Maybe this work is too big for us. It's pointless what we're doing. We've been doing it for so long and there's really not that much to show for it. Will it ever amount to something? And Sambalat is devaluing what the people are doing, minimizing the work, the results that have been achieved. And doubt is raised in people's hearts. It's a little bit like a little speck of mold that appears and then it starts spreading. And then it's just a matter of time before it covers the whole thing. It ruins the whole thing. It starts very small, barely visible, looks insignificant, but it gets in the heart and it starts doing its ruination. I don't know if you have experienced anything like it, maybe not during building a wall, but maybe at work. When your boss is not really encouraging when he's talking to you, but he only spots what's wrong and criticizes. And we get discouraged. It's not going to be good. I'll never amount to anything. How am I going to make it? What's going to happen to me? Or a quote-unquote good colleague who is minimizing what you're doing, not so roughly, just carefully, but frequently. And then one's heart can get heavy. And you can't do the work anymore the same way. You can't do your tasks the same way. And I was thinking, okay, let's turn this around. All right, how do we behave? What is our speech like towards others? What is our relationship to others? Is it encouraging? Or is it destructive? The way we express ourselves, the way we speak to others. Do we edify them? Or do we destroy them? This can be done in a very cultural manner, but the effect is the same. And it doesn't even depend on your volume. It's worthwhile checking ourselves. What is our relation to our families, to our children, to our colleagues, the ones that we meet? Well, this is what the builders experience, that there's all kinds of outside discouragement coming their way. And an interesting thing happens. Nehemiah says a pretty strange prayer. Strange to us, let me first say, though, with a big exclamation point, that he first prays, though. He first prays. As strange as this prayer might sound to us, this particular prayer, Nehemiah first prays. And just a couple of aspects so that we could understand this prayer. When we read the Bible, we see similar things in Psalms. These are kind of like the curse Psalms, cursing Psalms, and we like to flip over them like, we don't know what to do with those. These are a little bit rough. How could these even be in the Bible? But when you meet something like this, remember that God didn't leave those in the Bible accidentally. If you think about it, how much work God has in preserving His Word, that the Bible can be at our disposal, well, we can, I think, forget about books being accidental in the Bible. God has preserved, kept His Word for us so we can read it. So then why are those chapters in the book? Well, certain things we must read, even New Testament believers. One of them is, what we must see, is that Sanballat, as Nehemiah puts it, is not only opposing the Judeans and the builders of the wall, but he opposes God. The Old Testament talks about God standing beside His people, and He's going to protect His people. And if someone attacks His people, then he's going to find himself opposing God. We found it at Joshua and also at Moses. If we look at Abraham or go back further, God promised that His people's enemies will be punished. And there's a very interesting passage in Deuteronomy where God says through Moses, "Vengeance is mine. Vengeance is mine, is not yours. It's been taken away from you." And it's remembered to consciously remind ourselves that vengeance is not ours. It's God's. We must hand it over to him, and this is what Nehemiah does. He says, I don't want to take vengeance. I want to hand this over to you, God. You do what you see fit. I think that these people are not only opposing us, but you too. Then you do what you see fit, because you see the full truth. In the New Testament in which we live, we've gotten a different standard. Because when the Lord Jesus came and taught us, he said, love our neighbors. And on the other hand, he said, those that curse you, what should we do to them? Bless them. Well, that doesn't happen by itself. We just can't do it ourselves. For this, we need him. We need his Spirit to live in us. But this is how it can become a reality. This is the miracle of the New Testament. That's why the old passed away, because we can now be able, through him, to live up to the new. Christ that lives in us can make it happen. And this is our new standard. We need to adjust our lives to this new standard. But it's important to see that Nehemiah goes to God, before God, in prayer, and hands this problem over to God. He pushes or hands this huge baggage over to God. So I was thinking, us New Testament believers that are in a much more privileged situation, do we know about this? Do we know that we can go to God and we can hand our baggage over to him? And not just by saying that we have a baggage, but you can also leave it at his feet. Because often we come to God with this huge baggage, say, God, look at how big it is, how much it presses me, how heavy it is, and all these things that are in this baggage. Please help me. And then we go on carrying the baggage without leaving it with God. Although God said, come unto me and give it to me, I will carry it for you. I bear it for you. I'll take your burden over. I will deliver you. Do we know that? Do we know the certainty of this, that we can do this, that we can be relieved? Not that the situation gets solved right away, not that the circumstances change right away, but my burden gets off of me. And that way, relieved, we can be a different person in the same situations. Because now it's not pressing me anymore, because I'm not only seeing myself, but I see God as well. Do I know about this? Do I experience this? That I'm important for him? That God cares about me? That he's not just some bureaucrat pushing files around like, here's a request, we'll look at it later, but here's another one more important, let me get involved with this. No, he's not like that. He points his attention to you. And he cares about you. He wants to know what's with you, and he wants to look at your requests, and he's with you. Do you know that you're safe with him? That you don't have to be under the control of the roaring circumstances? If you know that, then you can go on. You can continue the work, because you will be relieved from your burden. And Nehemiah does this. He goes to God. He hands the whole thing over to God, and he says, all right, well, this is God's work from now on, then I can go back to my work. And let's continue. Then let's do our work. And there's no big problem, because God has promised that he's going to protect us, that we're in his hand, and whatever happens, just like Andor said earlier, whatever happens, we're in his hands. We're in God's mercy. That's what it means. We're safe with him. Even if my muscle snaps, I'm still safe with him. If there's some other difficulty, I'm still safe with him. I'm with him. And we read in verse 6 that Nehemiah and the people continue to work, and they're progressing real well because people are very enthusiastic, and they get to half of the height of the original wall. And it's a pretty serious result that at least they've done half of the work, so there's something to show for their work. And from here on, there's a little bit less left of the work. And so the team is quite enthusiastic. All right, we're doing well. Yeah. But the outside pressure mounts too. And the situation is intensifying. And instead of the problems being solved, things getting squared away. Well, instead of that, what we're saying is things are becoming more difficult. And I was thinking, how's that possible? Haven't they prayed? And on top of it, Nehemiah prayed, not just anybody. Isn't everything already solved? Things are not squared away? No. No. Because prayer in this respect is not a panacea. It's not like some magic wand. Hope, we just solve the problems like that. But prayer is the place where you put your burdens down before God. You let yourself to Him, and you realize that He's God, and I'm safe with Him. I tell Him the desires of my heart, my request, what I would like, and then I trust God. I know You as a good God. You want my good. And therefore, You, in Your time, will take care of this. And if this is what's in you, then you know that you can take the situation differently. For example, when the situation gets harder after your prayer is not improving but worsens, you can still take it. You can read that the enemy has conspired. And I don't have my map here and my slides, but just try to imagine Jerusalem is in the middle, Samaria is to the north of it, with Sanballat and the army of Samaria. And then how shall I show this so without getting you mixed up? There's the west to you. Okay, this would be west to you. Or to me, I forgot. Anyway, there's Ashdod. That would be the seaside with the Philistines. On the other side, there's the east, that's Tobiah and the Ammonites. And on the south, below Jerusalem, is Geshem and the Arabians. So they're practically surrounded. That little city of Jerusalem is, you could say, they're surrounded. And this is a group of people that don't have much to do with each other normally. Not that these folks have lived in perfect peace with each other, but now they have a common goal. They have a common enemy to go against, to destroy Jerusalem. So they have conspired. And let me just stop here for a moment. And I would like to say a few sentences about the nature of conflicts. Why do they exist? Why is it that this Sanballat guy just can't let go? And that not only him, but there's a whole bunch of other people that join him. How is that? Why are conflicts like that in the world? Why is such animosity and ill will? Why is Sanballat so vicious? I think it's got a human side to it. When someone might experience that the status quo has changed, the present power relations have changed, and these guys are now building something. Maybe they'll have a city, and then we'll have to retrieve. They'll be strengthened. Who knows where it's going to lead to? And it's difficult to put up with that. So far, we had some kind of a power relation. I knew how much power I had, and it's now changing, and I don't want my power to be lessened or to decrease. This is the human side of it. But I think the more important side of it is not the visible world, but the invisible world, which is just as real, unless it's more real than the visible world, because God does His work. He exists in this invisible world as a spirit. This is where He's active, and will exist with Him once in this invisible world when He takes us to Himself. And there's a conflict in this invisible world. There's a battle going on. It's an interesting situation because we read that God has already defeated the evil, yet there are still battles raging in the invisible world, and God has decided that His victory will not be validated by wiping out all resistance in the visible world. He could do, if He wanted to, but no, in this period of grace, there are still battles raging because God allows this, and the enemy and his hosts are still fighting against the spreading of the kingdom of God, against the things of God, against the children of God. And in the invisible world, this goes on constantly right around us, and we're in the midst of this. And people experience this. It has an effect on us. This is not something that goes on independent of us. It's not something outside of us. But what goes on in the invisible world has an effect on us, and we experience it. And Satan, in any given case, can choose his tools, he can convince his tools what to do, and he turns them against the people of God, the children of God. And therefore, in an inexplainable way, there's hatred against the people of God. Therefore, sometimes we can experience such wrath or hatred that is unexplainable, that is pointed towards you, or directed towards you. It's unexplainable logically, but it's just the enemy having an effect on you. What do you do in a situation like that? Who do you trust? Who do you cling to? Because our God is more powerful than the enemy. It's not a battle of two equal parties, the light and the dark, battling each other. No. The living God is much more powerful, and if you belong to him and if you cling to him, you don't have to be afraid of this whole situation, but calculate with this. Know about this, know that this goes on, and prepare for it. And when you experience it, then draw nearer to the Father. Hang on to him and trust him that with him you'll be safe. If we look at what goes on in America right now, we see something similar going on. Very big changes are sweeping through that country, and there's more and more persecution turning against Christians. Not much is needed for the situation to drastically change, to be changed. What does Nehemiah do? We read that we have prayed to our God, and we have set watchmen on the wall. On the one hand, our main tool or weapon is our prayer. Our main tool is prayer in this invisible fight, but that's not our only job. We also read at Isaiah that even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. And then, of course, it goes on how their strength will be renewed. We like that part better. But yeah, it is a real thing. Anybody can get weary. We can all get tired. That's not a tragedy. I would say this is more like natural. Now that you can get up from the floor and you don't have to stay there, now that's not natural. This is what can only be done with God's help. But don't scold yourself and for being discouraged. Just understand, yeah, this happens to us, and then we can come to God in prayer and we can get strength from him. But this is what the Judeans have experienced, and they say, the workers got weary and there's still so much rubbish, we can't build this wall. It seems that what Sanballat has started came to fruition. And it's not only Sanballat saying it, who's saying the same doubts? The workers that have been working so far. Now it's their own complaint. Very dangerous when this type of psychological warfare happens and you don't resist it. Because sooner or later, it enters in your heart and it becomes your own, and you start seeing the situations the same way as the enemy. And maybe they feel like, okay, well, the intention was really nice, the idea was good, but we can't do this. We should have known this better right from the get-go. Others couldn't have succeeded at this. Why should we? And sooner or later, the initial inspiration wanes. So what's going to carry you on? Is there anybody to carry you on? And then, so far, the resistance and the facts were coming from without, and now even the local folks start complaining, sharing the doubts. And not only that, but the enemy is also saying, okay, it's time now to attack. It's just a matter of minutes. We have now surrounded Jerusalem, so soon we can begin to fight. So the situation is intensifying. The whole thing is becoming more dangerous. And in these situations, the good-willed brethren show up, and we read in verse 12 that it came to pass that when the Jews which dwelt by and came, and they wanted the builders to return home to protect their own towns. See, these folks that have not done any work so far, stayed home in the little villages and towns nearby, now they come and complain that the guys that have come over to work should return because we need protection, because the enemy approaches. This all sounds very reasonable. Yeah, it sounds so right, but this is the most dangerous when seemingly reasonable arguments are made. These can really hinder the work, and we can throw our hands in the air and say, what can we gain? Say, of course, yeah, folks, go home and protect your families. So what's Nehemiah going to do in this situation when the pressure is not only mounting from without but also from within, and the pressure, the resistance is so big that it covers us and makes us impossible? At this time, verse 13 says, Therefore I sat in the lower places behind the wall, and on the higher places I even set the people after their families with their swords. Interesting to see how it goes. It says, Therefore I. There was an earlier verse that started similar. I think it was 4 or 6, where I said, Therefore I, Nehemiah says, I've prayed. Nehemiah shares his prayer. He says, at that time, Nehemiah. But then when we get up to verse 13, he's not praying anymore, he's acting. And I'm always marveling what a great example Nehemiah is of how God can cooperate with man. That this collaboration between God and man, how wonderful, because we tend to slip either one way or the other. Either we try to push everything over onto God and just pray and do nothing, just waiting for something to happen, or we don't care about God, we just go after our own thoughts, thinking that we can do it in our own strength. But this connection, this joining up, this cooperation between God and us hardly ever happens. But we see with Nehemiah that he has both. He trusts God, he prays, he listens to God, he tells God, he hands his burdens over and trusts his leading, but then on the other hand, he also acts and he does what he can do. And in that little passage, this little verse, you can see how Nehemiah uses his own understanding, his senses that he has received from God. He's not like many times you have these holy people that say, no, we shouldn't do anything, we should just listen to God, God will do everything. No, God didn't created us machines or robots, senseless robots, but he has given us all understanding, comprehension, senses, and thinking so that we could use them under God's presence, light, and wisdom, but to use them. And Nehemiah says, I have set people on those sections of the wall where the enemy's attack were most expected on a human level. So in other words, you don't always have to expect God to do your work for you. You can use your own sense. We must use our own sense many times, and let us do that, and let's work together with God. And the sovereign God and the free-willed man can join up together and can collaborate and can do the work together. How nice it would be to experience this in our own church, to listen to God, pass things on to Him, waiting for His leading, but then on the other hand, from what we understand and what we see fit under His leading, we should do. And this is not only what Nehemiah does. He doesn't only set the soldiers on the wall, but he also gets in front of them and talks to them because he knows what destruction has already been done by what came to them. And it doesn't matter if they stayed or not, but if their soul is not in order, they can't do the work right. We know this for ourselves. If we're discouraged, if we lose heart, we can't even do 1/10 of what we could normally do because our heads are in a different place. We do things differently. And Nehemiah gets in front of the people. He said, I looked and I rose up and I said to the nobles and to the rulers and the rest of the people, be not ye afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. So I was thinking how wonderful this encouragement is, that this is real encouragement when you can talk to somebody in a way where you get their eyes off of their own circumstances and onto God. And you don't only say, just hang on, it'll get better, you'll get over it. That's not real encouragement, but when you can get their eyes onto the same God that you're also looking at, who is greater than my problem, who's greater than my enemy, who's able to lead you through to your difficulties. Look at him, lift your eyes on him, and compared to him, the enemy is not that great. Compared to that God, the problem is not that big. Don't look at them, but think of the everlasting. How nice it would be to learn that from Nehemiah, to encourage each other, to turn towards each other like that. And then he puts the human side, says, but you should fight. Do what you can do, what is your part. And there comes another encouragement in verse 19 and 20. You're not alone in this. Be not afraid. Our God shall fight for us. I was thinking, how could Nehemiah be so sure of that? How could he say such a thing? Because if it's not true, then it's a real big hoax. He just misleads people. How did he have the courage to say that? Well, I think enough to look back a little bit to what happened so far. The things we've looked at in the last 3 times, how much God has accomplished. And I think we need to stop a little bit and look back. How much has happened? How much has God accomplished? And if he's there in the past, and he's still alive, then has he then forsaken us? Is he busy with something else? No. Then he's still here. He was not only Lord and God in the past and could only act in the past, but he acts now too, and he does his work now, and you can cling on to him. As Nehemiah starts out, right back in the faraway palace of Shushan, when he says, this is your people. These are the ones that you have made your promise to. We are it. Do we have that belief in us? That we're the ones that God spoke to, that we're God's people? Because he has chosen us. And he has invited us and he has adopted us as his children. How are we with this? Dear EBK, how are we doing on this? Do we have this certainty in our heart that God has not only been here once, we have not only experienced once, can we dare to say that God is fighting for us now too, for this church, for his people, for me? Do I have this confidence or this conviction? Satan will try anything to steal that from your heart. And he'll try everything, and then we'll be left with these nice generalities and these nice little sayings we hang on the wall. We can repeat them, but they're not ours. It's not mine. Because I don't have belief behind it. I never really believed that it's about me or for me, that I am the people that God made the promise to. That he is my God, that he is my Father, and I'm his child. I'm his saved one. I belong to him. Let him convince you. Read his word that way. That is for you. It's a message to you, not to somebody else. He's talking to you. You are his beloved child. And if you have this confidence in your heart, then you can have outside enemy or resistance or pressure. You will have the strength to stand, and you can hang on to that Lord who can help you over this difficulty. And you can experience what Nehemiah and his people have experienced, that they got help through this critical period, and you will see him. I wish we could let God convince us of that. That He is not the neighbor's, not XYZ's, but mine.
Én meg az övé.
And I'm his.
És az Isten ért
And God fights for us as well. And he accomplishes his work. May his name be blessed. Amen.